guys, what is going on? Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Deborah with Purusha Holistic Wellness, and this is my YouTube channel, Purusha Intuitive. So welcome. If it is your first time, I appreciate your time and energy so much. This is a channel that I've created just around everything holistic, health and well-being, mind, body, soul, spirit. We kind of explore it all. So we've been talking a lot about Ayurveda. I am an Ayurvedic consultant. I help people towards their health and wellness, kind of reach their wellness goals through the practice and the principles of Ayurveda. It is an amazing, holistic medicine. I highly recommend you to do a little discovery, deep dive into what it really is about. It is known as the science of life, and legit, that is the best, analogy for it, or definition, maybe I should say, right? It's as if, I was saying this in the last video, it's as if someone just sat there and studied, the right way to live and transcribed it. And this happened thousands of years ago. This information has been around for 5,000-6,000 years. So and at a time where we didn't have science, we didn't have the same type of technology and measurement that we do in modern day. So it's really cool to see how this ancient wisdom, ancient knowledge is still relevant today. That's part of the reason why I'm so in love with this modality of healing. It is just something that is easy, honestly, and it makes sense. It's something that, yes, it's preventative medicine, right? So it is more about incorporating different protocols into your daily living to prevent disease and illness. But then there's also protocols to put into place if you do wind up in that spot, sick, cold, flu, maybe something a little bit more intense as well. It's natural healing, so it takes a minute. It's not a quick fix. It is not the magic pill, but usually when we are being sold that, it's that concept of too good to be true. So we've been talking in these videos about the 5 different elements. Ayurveda believes that these elements come in, they are, I should back up, that Purusha is unmanifest potential, and Prana is what brings that unmanifest potential into being via the 5 elements, right? So ether, air, fire, water, earth, those comprise in different varying amounts. Those comprise everything that is around us, whether it is a tree, whether it's a person, whether it's a book or, a crystal, whatever it is. And it really is a great way to look at life because it makes things accessible. Like I said, it's easy. It's not a quick fix, but it's probably the easiest mode of health and well-being that I've come across in my years of study. And I've been in natural wellness for almost 20 years now. It makes the most sense. And I find that when something resonates, when it makes a lot of sense, when it rings true, it is actually truth, right? What I love too is that it's individualized for each of us, right? So there's no one size fits all. So that being said, we've talked about how, the 5 elements, depending on, the content, depending on the percentage, the 5 elements really do make up our physiology constitution. Ayurveda breaks those down into 3 different doshas. There is Vata, which governs transportation. So moving whatever we're ingesting from point A to point B. Pitta is transformation. It takes that substance and it turns it into nutrients, what our body understands for nurture well-being, and it expels you know, the toxins, the excess, the things that we don't need. And then kapha is the building blocks, right? It's the cohesion. It's what keeps us together, essentially. So when we look at health and wellness through this lens, it makes bringing our body back into balance way easier, you know? So do you know someone, do you personally, or do you know someone who struggles with a lot of respiratory conditions? The respiratory system is under the umbrella of Vata. Pretty self-explanatory. Vata is made of air and ether elements. And so obviously when we think of the respiratory system, it deals with breathing, right? Breathing in the prana, our lungs, you know, all the inner workings, the valves, etc. And it really, you know, it is what is our chest, right? So dealing with our throat region where we inhale, our oral cavity. So as I mentioned, air is the sense manifestation of sound and of touch, okay? It governs our lung, our colon, our respiration. We talked about that. Circulation, movement of chromosomes, RNA, DNA, all involuntary and voluntary actions, as well as the movement of neurons and our skin, right? So when we think about the air element, yes, it's a little bit more dense than ether. Like I talked about in the last video, all of the elements are subsequent of one another, right? So we start with that air, or the ether, we talked about, that's in the cranial space. And then we move to the air, which is a little more dense. It has a little bit more, you know, grounding properties to it than what we find with space and ether. And it is going to also govern that concept of prana because it is about what we inhale. But when we take things through, when we inhale or ingest something through our oral cavity, it's actually going to go down into our system, right? Down into our body. Yes, obviously air moves into our lungs and through the heart. So the body can, or the heart can clear out any harmful, you know, toxins, you know, but then it is utilized through the lungs, clean air, etc. But then also that part that goes down into the digestive system, right? The colon or large intestine is also governed by Vata energy, right? This is kind of, if you think about it, even just on a physical standpoint, it's like a big tube, right? So tube, though it's like a channel or a system which is governed by Vata, that concept of transportation, right? So this is that idea of like, what are we ingesting? How are our cells moving? So ether, we take it in. Air is how those cells move from one point to the other, right? It's our ability for that health and wellness. If we don't have movement, if certain messages can't be sent to certain parts of our body, then our system is not going to work in a harmonious and cohesive way, right? So we want to make sure that those channels are clear so that those messages can get sent, you know? Whether it is about maintaining our respiratory system, our ability to breathe, to take in. Obviously, there's a lot of viruses, bacteria raining down on us every day. We have allergens, dust, you know, I was going to say hay fever, you know, it just depends, right? And those all go through the respiratory system first, right? Like our lungs are kind of, you know, what filters out, like I said, the bad stuff so that our body can use the pure oxygen in the highest and best way. Did you know that the lungs are also where we store our grief, right? So this is a really interesting concept for me. It's something that I've been playing around with. Obviously the lungs, what we inhale through our oral cavity, all deals with our throat chakra, that element of grief, like I said, that we withhold or hold in. And if you've ever studied the respiratory system, you know that what we inhale, it has to pass through the heart in order for the blood to be cleansed, or in order for the toxins to be cleansed, so that our body can utilize, that prana, essentially. And if things are not being cleansed appropriately, that's where we cause the buildup, or if we are not someone that is in an environment where we feel like we can speak our truth, kind of utilize our voice, our throat chakra, etc., that all gets trapped in our lungs. Any kind of pain, sadness, grief, suffering, it's connected to that ability for us to utilize our voice, to express our truth. And essentially what that's doing is keeping our channels clear, right? I totally believe that disease manifests in the emotional, energetic body before it takes root in our physiology, in the physical world. And if we think about this, right, emotions, feelings, things that we want to say, if we keep shoving them down, yes, it's a concept of energy, it's a vibration, but those vibrations manifest into physicality. It manifests into something, and when we shove them down, it's going to manifest as a blockage over time, right? It might not be the first time you choose not to cry, or whatever it is. Stand up for yourself, say what you need to say. It might not be the first time, right? But we get into these habits and these patterns about what we can and can't say, or overutilizing, running our mouth too much. We kind of vacillate on one end or the other. And when we're caught in either of those spaces, it actually is kind of creating that blockage within our being. And like I said, depending on where you're at, where your environment is, who you surround yourself with, etc., is going to kind of dictate that overall feeling of health and wellness and well-being. So Dr. Vasant Lad says air is electrical energy. So think of that. It is it's not fire, right? But it is the friction that is created, right? So when we think of ether, it's a little bit more, ambiguous, transcendental, etc. And then the air is actually what starts creating that friction. It almost reminds me of when a storm is brewing, right? You get that electrical energy, that build up. Think of that. Think of how the weather patterns, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. So think of it like in the bigger context of, or what we would deem as a bigger context of weather, and how a thunderstorm builds up. There becomes more and more and more pressure within the air until it finally gives way, and obviously lightning is that electricity, the electrons bumping into each other, creating, I think I'm saying that right, but essentially creating that friction. And the friction, like we talked about, it's kind of what helps move, right, the cell from point A to point B, or whatever we have ingested. And it is actually preparing, it's a giving way for that fire energy, because that electric energy, it is what allows something to ignite. It's what allows that fire energy to come into being. So Dr. Vasant Lad says about the air element Vayu, or air, is the principle of movement that governs all sensory stimuli and motor responses, voluntary or involuntary actions, as well as respiration and circulation. It governs all subtle cytoplasmic and microscopic movement like RNA and DNA. And the major sites of air within the body are the lungs and the colon. So we kind of already touched on that, but what I like about this is it reminds us that the booty, excuse me, the body, it's always moving, it's always working, right? Like, there's so many involuntary actions going on all the time, right? That we're not even conscious of, aware of. It's kind of like mind-boggling to think about, in my opinion. If you've ever studied anatomy and physiology, you can probably totally resonate with this. Everything is intricate and working in harmony together. And part of the value of that air energy is it helps things move, right? It is that electrical energy. It is what, okay, so we breathe in with the ether element. It hits our brain. Those electrical responses, those snaps, are like essentially that Vayu or air energy that Dr. Vasant Lad talks about. And it can go to the most subtle levels, right? Our DNA, RNA. And remember, like, DNA turns on and off, you know? I mean, we see this with genetic disorders or places, you know, unfortunately, like cancer, you know, it's mutated DNA. And that is why, a big reason why it's so important to be mindful of these aspects of health and wellness. When we think about it on this level of how it's not just the air we're breathing in. Yes, I mean, obviously air, environment, chemicals, toxins, they all play a role in our physiology. We talked a little bit about this in the last video. It's also the element of how we are allowing our body to breathe. Do we actually fill our lung capacity? You know, do we need to take some time to do some breath work like pranayama throughout the day? This is such a simple, straightforward technique. It easily aligns the left and right hemisphere, left and right side of the body. It allows us to feel more grounded, more aligned. It's amazing what like 5 breaths of pranayama does for someone. And it's like literally a minute, maybe 2, you know, that you have to take to do it. And it automatically grounds you into what's more in alignment with, you know, if you're in a stressful situation, it helps kind of diffuse that energy and then say, okay, what do I need to do moving forward? How do I need to respond to this? Instead of feeling all like frazzled and wound up and then responding out of that space, you know, energetically, you can feel the value, you can feel the difference. And air is, okay, so we have sound, and it's also the touch energy, right? Like we talked about. So it's kind of this manifest of, you know, that reverberation of consciousness. Touch comes into play. It's like we can begin to see what we are, you know, what we're kind of like trying to bring into form, trying to bring into being, those reverberations of consciousness, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. They're beginning to manifest into like the physical world, right? And that's kind of where we speak our truth, you know, we cry, we let go of grief and sadness and pain so that it is not stuck in our respiratory system. A lot of times, if you are someone who, you know, kind of holds on, doesn't speak your truth, etc., you're going to end up with a lot more respiratory issues, right? Because that's where, in this space, the chest, you know, to the throat is where it all gets stored and congested. We can breathe in, but then somewhere along that pathway, it gets stagnant. And so that's what we're trying to do, is find ways to counteract that. Like I said, breath work is a great way to do that. many yogis have talked about how, we just don't breathe in modern times, if you're a smoker of any kind, that even kind of lessens that, you're breathing in more of the toxins, the chemicals, etc. No shade at all. But just kind of saying, like, thinking about it on a larger level, not just the action, not the physical substance, not just what you're doing, but actually like how that is manifesting in your world, how that's manifesting in your daily life, how it's affecting your physiology, right? And where are places that you might be holding on to, that you might be, essentially blocking yourself or starting that manifestation of disease. This, and honestly, like even just being stagnant, right? So air governs movement. If we're sitting too long, most of us modern day, everything's technology. It's winter time, like it's hard to get outside, that type of vibe, but we still need that movement. We still need that exercise, etc., because that's what keeps things moving and flowing, right? If you've studied or know about the lymphatic system, it's what carries different types of fluids throughout the body. It's also a huge detoxifier. Modern day, most of us don't get, that lymph flush, so to speak, from our body. And we kind of need to stimulate that, like by doing dry brushing in the morning. Just taking less than 5 minutes to dry brush your body stimulates the lymphatic system. It helps with detoxification. It helps remove what our body doesn't need, the things that we hold on to, excess weight, toxins, inability to release, to digest properly, inability to transform substances we take in, etc. Learning like these little techniques that Ayurveda is so knowledgeable in helps give us that extra boost of confidence. Like I said, the two techniques that I described today, the pranayama and the dry brushing, both, you can do that in less than 5 minutes combined, And so when we incorporate these things, again, we're allowing our body, the channels, the systems to be open and fluid and working for our benefit instead of being stagnant, blocking energy and building up disease. So I hope this helps. I hope it gives you a little deeper insight into air as it relates to Ayurveda. If you want me to take a look at your specific situation, I totally would love and be honored to help you out in whatever way possible. Check out what services I offer below. Definitely make sure to like, share, subscribe the videos, drop your comments. What are your thoughts around this topic, or how does it manifest in your life? I would love to build and grow the community as much as possible. So thank you so much. Lots of love and blessings. I appreciate your time and energy always.